Defining a structure for a fact table and using a SQL script and then loading the data into it using bids like we did with the dimension table is going to look very, very similar. So I'm going to skip that single step. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to pick out and define a star schema from this AdventureWorks data warehouse, and then I'm going to show you how you can actually move that star schema in a series of steps into our own data warehouse below it. You might notice that what also I've done is I've deleted the dimension table I was using before just to sort of clean things up. The table I'm going to use for my fact table, let's scroll down a little bit, there's one down here called fact internet sales, and it looks like a likely candidate. It would be an interesting thing to be able to query and do some analysis on, so I'm going to use that. And I'm going to define the star schema structure by just basically looking at what's already there. I'm going to create a new database diagram, and I'm going to add my fact table for internet sales to it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add all the related tables to it just to see what's out there. You can see there is an awful lot of related tables that are there. And rather than boring you with rearranging them, I'm going to pick out some of I think the more relevant ones and rearrange it in a little bit better order. So I'm going to pause the video here and come back when I'm finished. I've rearranged this diagram where the center of the diagram sits the fact table. Let's spend a little bit of time looking at this particular schema here. Around it are 6 dimensions that relate to it. If you look very carefully, let me bump this up so it's maybe a little easier to see. If you look at the fact internet sales table, you'll see that down below here are a number of columns that have costs, amounts, basically numeric information, and for the most part these are the things we're going to be aggregating, taking sums of, averages of, etc. There is also, if you look to the side here, a dimension table that's product, and this key right next to the word product key here is quite important. This means it's a primary key, which means that there are numbers in here in each row that uniquely identify a product for each row in the product table. So for example, a product key might be number 238, and it identifies a specific set of unit measures, characteristics of the product. Now, this product number 238 product key also appears up here as what's called a foreign key in my internet sales table. So if I sold, say 125 units times, say I have 225 sales of product number 238, this number 238 would be in 125 different rows in the internet sales. So that means that if I went into a particular row, I could take a product key, specifically maybe 238, go to the product table, look up product key 238 and find all the information I need to know about it in that table. And similar things I could do for dates, I could do for all the other 6 dimension tables that are sitting here. They have similar relationships between each of the fact table and the dimension table themselves. Now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be moving, copying the structure and moving the data. I'm going to be moving the data in each of these tables down to my own data warehouse down here. Let me close this so we can see it a little bit better. Here's my own data warehouse. I want to duplicate this down here, and I'm going to do it in steps. The first step is I'm going to move the table structure and data together using SSIS, but not the Business Intelligence Development Studio you saw earlier. SSIS appears under the covers in many different parts, and I'm going to use the part of Management Studio that uses SSIS. I'm going to actually move all these tables individually down, or as a group, into my data warehouse. Then I've got to go in and I've got to define each of these keys, which I'll do, and finally I've got to make the relationships, build the relationships, which I'll do as well. And I'll do all that graphically. So at the end of the process, I will have duplicated this particular data schema, this particular star schema here, in my data warehouse. If I right-click on my data warehouse, there's some tasks here, and if I come down here, I want to import data, which, as I said earlier, is the first step. This actually uses SSIS as just sort of its driving force underneath here. When it comes up with this particular wizard, it's the SQL Server Import and Export wizard, and I'm just going to say next here, and it's going to grind a little bit and identify it wants to know what the data source is, and it starts out with the SQL client, and I'm going to use local instead of typing in my server name. I'm going to use Windows Authentication, and the database is going to be this is the source now that I want. If I go to the pull down menu, is the data warehouse for AdventureWorks. Now it's already, since I've already identified it as importing data, it's just, it's said the destination is already going to be my data warehouse, which is fine. I'm ready to move on. I want to copy from data from one or more tables or views, and I'm going to happy with that. It says, okay, these are all the ones in AdventureWorks, and I've got several of these. I got 6 of the. One of them is currency for dimensions. There is another one that is customer. Another one is date. Another one is product, and finally there is a promotion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 promotion. Alright, we've selected the 6 dimension tables. Scroll down and find our fact table, internet sales. Do next. I'm going to run immediately. Do finish. It's going to crank through. It's giving me a progress report as it executes each of the transactions. And there'll be some preliminary messages when it starts moving data in terms of rows down here. And so 105 were transferred here, 1188 here, and it's still cranking, doing things on the side. It's already moved down 12,000 rows of customers here. It's got a couple more to do. Round up 60,000 rows. There's a little bit of a system warning up here that's barking at me. I don't really care that much about. I'm not worried about that. It's not going to impact what I'm doing. So I'm going to close this. And now if I open up my tables and do our usual refresh operation, I've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of my dimension tables and my internet fact table. Now I need to come in and build. Don't forget, this is what's the structure that I'm actually trying to build from. That is the structure in my AdventureWorks data warehouse. Now I have to build a primary key, because if I look at dimension currency, for example, and look at column, the first column here is currency key, but it's not designated as a primary key. I'm going to go in and do that for each table. I'll show you one, and then I'll put it on pause and do the rest. If I click on that and go to design, click on the table name and go to design, it's pretty easy to do. I'll right click on this one. You can actually follow along if you want in your own, this whole process in your own data warehouse. And I'll click on set primary key. Then if I close it, it's going to ask me, do I want to save the changes to the following items? I say yes. And if I come here and do a refresh, open up the columns again, you see it's got a primary key. So I'll pause the video and do the rest of these and come back. I've set the primary key now for each of these 6 dimension tables in our fact table. What I want to do now is build these relationships between them. And the easiest way of doing that is, again, diagrammatically. I'll do a database diagram and a new one. I'll add my fact table first. And let me add another table. I'll do one table and then I'll spare you the rest. Again, you can follow along. Let me add the product table. Do close. And what I will do is I'm going to draw the relationship just by basically grabbing this with my left mouse, pulling it across and putting it, dropping it on product key. And it says, okay, it's called product key in both, so it's pretty easy to see, but if it could be called something different. As long as you drop it on the right stuff, you should be able to see on both sides. The primary key table is the product key. The foreign key table is always going to be fact internet. So you drag it from the dimension table to the fact table. I'll say OK and just OK all that. And now I have, this is a primary key going into my my product table. I'm going to go ahead and do the rest and pause the video and come back. Okay, when I saved when I closed the diagram up here, what it did, it saved the changes, and the basic change was it generated these foreign keys here. So now I have a structure that looks very much like, in fact, is identical to the structure that I had in my AdventureWorks data warehouse. So now I can move to the next step, which is beginning to define cubes on top of the star schema, and we'll do that next.